Hello everybody, welcome back to my next video in the On Wax review series. Haven't done one of these in a while, but today is going to be a very special review because I got my friend Andy Siuda with me to talk about Taylor Swift's release of Speak Now, Taylor's version. Thanks for joining me today, Andy.
Thanks for having me. I was very excited when you reached out. A little scared. This is my YouTube debut, so it's a big moment. Hopefully,
Yeah,
hopefully
man.
it's not my last.
Hopefully, this is a start of something beautiful. Okay, because this guy knows about music. He talks about music all the time. And hey, man, if this is your debut, I'm really honored that you decided to join me today. And welcome to the YouTube verse, if you will. And yeah, let's get into this album because obviously, as you all know at this point, I mean, I haven't done any reviews on Taylor Swift yet. But I'm personally quite a big Taylor Swift fan in general. I'm not going to, say everything she does is amazing because I don't really say that about any artist. If I think there's something that they could improve on, and Taylor's no exception. That's why I didn't do a review on Midnight's because I'm like I'm not out here to slander this woman. So I decided against it. But obviously she's been going back and doing all these re-recordings of her old albums due to the contract dispute with Scooter Braun, who's really kind of given her the stick, and I think it's really cool how she's kind of gone back and reclaimed these songs that made her popular in the first place and really taking them into her own hands and really one of the most unprecedented moves in modern music and marketing. And so I gotta give this woman the respect she deserves, especially as a songwriter as well. Obviously I think she got better as she went along, like when we get to Folklore, but here I think that this was really one of my favorites of her early stuff. I haven't heard the original in a while, but obviously it came out in like 2010. And I listened to it a few years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite a bit of a progression, you could say, from Fearless, which I also think is really solid. And I was shocked how many hits are on here. So coming back in all this years later and redoing it, obviously, you know what you're in for, essentially, and then some. And I think we can both agree, Andy. I think the one thing that stands out above all else, as opposed to her early recordings, is her voice. I think there's so much more clarity, there's so much more control, and I think that she's really grown into her voice as time went along, and I think it shows on all these songs.
Definitely, it's so much more just powerful and just full. Like some of the earlier recordings, there's that youthful energy, and we can get into that in a little bit of maybe
Sure.
something that's lost in the re-recording process. But if you ask me which voice sounds better, give me the just full, mature, controlled tones of the re-recordings and her recent albums.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, man, and I think it's interesting because I think it kind of helped Fearless, the re-recording of Fearless, as well as Red. Though I wouldn't say that. Just so you guys understand my stance on these re-recordings so far, as much as I do appreciate Taylor and give her a lot of credit and respect for what she's doing, I'm not as huge on these ones as much as I am the original recordings of the album. I mean, I'm sorry, I have to go with the originals, you know. But I think the closest one to me loving was Red. Maybe that's just because Red is one of my favorite Taylor Swift's albums, but I think that one was really good, and I think a lot of the new additions on the track listing were also very solid as well. And here, I mean, look, a lot of the songs are still great, like Mine, obviously, Back to December, the title track, Mean, which is one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs of all time, probably my top five Taylor Swift songs. Just such an iconic hook. Everybody knows that song, and I hope they love it because I certainly do. And yeah, a lot of these songs, they're the same. It's what you expect. I think Mean is interesting because there's that little guitar solo in the middle. I thought it was a really nice addition to the track, but the backing vocals to me, I don't think were as potently mixed as they were in the original recording. They weren't as prominent, and I was kind of missing that. Other than that, it felt like the same song. I don't know what you felt about that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing on Mean for me is just the vocal tone. Like, she doesn't have that country twang as prominently,
Mm-hmm.
which was sort of like her signature style on her first two albums, which only really came out on Mean on this album. And to
Mm-hmm.
lose that, I mean, frankly, I prefer it. If you're gonna ask me like country Taylor or pop Taylor, if those are the only two options, like I think going pop was the best thing that she did artistically and just career wise. Obviously, she became so super massive with the two albums in that sort of transition. Um, and with Mean, like it's not my. I don't think it really got better with re-recording
No.
necessarily, but I also don't think it got significantly worse. It's still a great song.
Yeah, I mean it's an undisputed Taylor classic. I think you could say, and you could say that about a lot of this album. But I think my biggest thing with this album is it went along. I just think a lot of the songs started sounding the same, and I never noticed that like the first time I listened to it because I don't know I really enjoyed it the first time around. I suppose I liked it a little less. So maybe I mean I don't not that I want to give Scooter Braun more money, right? But maybe I should go back to the original and kind of like see how I felt about the end. Excuse me. But regardless, I think there's certain moments here too. I mean, obviously we got to talk about a lot of people. There's a bit of a controversy with Better Than Revenge. Like she changed the lyric, and I wasn't. I went back and listened to the original recording, and the lyric was changed there as well. So I don't know if I ever got to hear the mattress lyric, and I guess people are upset. Like, well, she changed it because it was a more of a slut shaming lyric, and then people are upset because it wasn't the original lyric. So I don't know. She didn't have to do it, but like, it's okay, I guess. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that song personally, but I don't know. What do you think about that whole controversy there?
So I am glad that she changed it. I think
Yeah.
like looking back on this album, well, now we're 13 years from the original release, but if we're talking like 20 years down the line, and most people are gonna, at least most fans are going to insist that this is the definitive version of the album. Like, I just think the other line it didn't age well, and it's not going to get better in the years to come since like were it to not be changed in the re-recording. So
Mm-hmm.
um and like the rhyme matches up well enough, and people are still gonna sing the original if they want to. Like, I
Sure.
just think to put it like put not only pen to paper but just record it and have it on streaming and everything forever, or however long streaming lasts until we move on to the next form of media consumption. Um, I prefer the matches line, even though it's like not that great. It's okay.
Yeah, because I think my thing with it, I think the mattress one's much more clever. And I think the argument could be made where it's like, well, why do we have to make songwriters go change their original lyrics, sort of thing? So it doesn't really bother me, but I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of whatever on it. You know what I mean?
You know, Misery Business by Paramore, like it's a
No, I'm not.
similar
I'm not
vibe.
familiar.
The point for me is like I think if a woman wants to write a song and record that and say something vaguely misogynistic that won't age well, that that's totally fine. But like I feel awkward from my position, like singing along to it. So
Sure.
I just think as a like a business decision and for posterity, I support the change.
Yeah.
And speaking of Paramore, like this song's clearly influenced by Paramore, so much so
Hmm.
that we got Haley Williams here on a vault track.
That is true. That is true. And I do want to touch on those tracks because obviously a couple of them weren't vault tracks, but weren't on the original album, like ours and Superman. And honestly, I think they could have been nice additions to the original track listing, and I think they were quite nice additions on this album. I kind of love those songs. Not my favorites or anything like that, but they're definitely more the standout tracks on here. Um, but I think When Emma Falls in Love is probably, I don't know if you agree, but I think that's the best vault track on this album. I think it has that signature sense of the Taylor's sense of storytelling. It comes through on the song, but it's also very clever. It also is very meaningful, and it was supposedly is written about Emma Stone. And I'm a big Emma Stone fan, so I think that was a nice touch as well. But I think that probably is the closest thing to a new release on these that feels like a classic Taylor Swift song in the most traditional sense.
I definitely agree with that. Like I was listening with a friend who said like this sounds like a Fearless song. Like I think this sounds it just it's first of all it's just like a cute song. I am a big fan of it. But I think just songwriting wise and even a little bit vocally, it's tapping into more of that um, childlike sort of just youthfulness of Fearless and of her first album, more so than some of these, which are either of the Speak Now era or just completely different. Like I think there's
Mm-hmm.
no song in Taylor's discography that sounds like I Can See You, and that's why that's my favorite. So
Okay,
I think there are three vault tracks that I'm a pretty big fan of, and then three that I don't really care for much at all.
let's
And
hear it.
so when Emma Falls in Love is in the win column
Good, good,
with
good.
I Can See You, and then I really like Castles Crumbling because one of the things with Speak Now for me, this like fairy tale fantasy imagery is huge. Like Enchanted and Long Live are probably my two favorite songs on the album, and they're the most
Really?
like magical, sparkling. Like it's just there's this glamour and also just like surrealism to both of those songs. It's fantastical, for lack of a better word. And I think Castles Crumbling just it has that imagery, even if um, it's more of a metaphor even than like Enchanted. I guess I mean they're all metaphors,
Right.
but like the Castles Crumbling is sort of um, on the nose, talking about like just stuff falling apart.
Sure.
And
No, go
no,
ahead. My
sorry,
bad. No, it's all good. Well, I think it's interesting you bring up those tracks because Long Live for me is it's interesting because personally, like I really like it, but I just think it's a bit corny. Like like
yeah.
it's cool. I appreciate the subject matter, them graduating high school and all that, but I can't fully love it because it just feels a bit twee to me. I guess.
I think Speak Now toes that line though. Like
Sure.
you're either in or you're out with some of the like childishness, but also like imagination of it. And I think like most people agree Enchanted is a hit.
Hmm.
It's just kind of that big moment in the second half of the album. It's just I believe it's the longest song on there. And
Um.
it's got
Actually,
that
no. Sorry. Go ahead. Go
Dear
ahead.
John is longer. Just looking at it
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It looks like Dear John's probably the longest one on there.
Um, Regardless, Enchanted's got that "Please don't be in love with someone else" that repeated in the background, and like that's been like a TikTok trend, and it's just it's a classic song for a reason. And I think just to move over to that quickly, it is still my favorite in the re-recording. I think there's no, it's improved upon the original because I think it's just so grand. Like you want that fuller voice for something like a Dear John or a Mean. I could see why the innocent youthfulness of her original recording might be more like emotionally evocative and just sort of like crushing. But for these kind of like anthems or like power ballads, like Haunted and Long Live and Enchanted, um, I think just like stylistically, her new voice matches really well with them.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like it's interesting you mention that because like for me, I think by the time I feel like there might be a few more songs that stand out to me more than Enchanted. I guess not that it's a bad song. I just it's never like fully stood out to me in that way. But I think Never Grow Old is definitely one of the deeper cuts on Speak Now that I think is really beautiful. You know, her talking about growing up and especially coming at it now from as old as she is. I think it's a nice kind of revisiting moment on the album. I will say though one song that kind of bothered me, and maybe you can speak to this. I don't know, but the Story of Us, I felt like it just feels a bit awkward with the abrupt vocal sequiturs, and I don't know if that was how it was in the original one, but that kind of bothered me when I was listening to it.
It's not. It's more like robotic and stark in the re-recording, the next chapter specifically.
Mm.
Um, when she says that, and that's like my biggest complaint for a change. It just doesn't sound that good. Also, a
Yeah.
song I'm not crazy about, at least relative to the rest of the album. Like some people really like it. It's got some like quotable lines, I suppose, that work in a just soundbite. But as a song in general, I think she did the sort of pop punk inspired sound at least better on Better Than Revenge.
Mm.
Um, and it's just a pretty basic song lyrically. I think there are more imaginative songs lyrically and just more emotional songs lyrically, like a Dear John.
Sure, sure. I could see that. Well, I'll tell you. Speaking of that pop punk sense, Electric Touch was a vault track I wanted to talk about because I was into it. When Taylor was singing, and then Pete Wentz comes in, and then you can just count me out. I mean, I'm not I'm not a huge fan of that one, and I was wondering if
Yes,
that was one of the ones that might have been one of the L's for you.
it's not one of the other favorites.
Okay, cool.
Neither are the last two on here.
Mm.
I guess for different reasons. I just think Electric Touch is pretty boring. It could have been really good. It could have leaned into it. It doesn't. It's not even. It doesn't sound like a Fall Out Boy song. It doesn't really sound like a Taylor Swift song. It sounds like
Yeah,
something in between that's not as good as either. So just give me. I don't know. And the other thing, like you got this one at least genre wise is pretty close to what we would expect from Taylor Swift and Fall Out Boy. It's not maybe not as like bombastic or punky or just interesting, frankly. But Castle's Crumbling, the fact that that is not like a pop punk like power ballad kind of surprised me. Just you got Haley Williams on here and she's doing it. She has a great performance, and I think the song is pretty
sure.
great. It's just so much more mellow and like introspective, reflective, and I was expecting something just punchier. Still a highlight. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like my favorite, but I will say I really did like Haley's performance on it vocally. But I think my biggest thing with these re-recordings, I just think they're way too long. Like, yes, some of the new additions are nice, but come on, Taylor, this isn't songs in the key of life, right? So that's always been my kind of gripe with these because if it weren't for that, I might actually say I like the original version more than the re-recording. But even regardless, like that's before these tracks were added onto this. So I wouldn't necessarily call it an improvement at all. I actually, you might disagree with this, but I actually think Fearless is a bit better. The re-recording of Fearless, I felt like the clarity she added to those songs was much more felt on like the big hits like You Belong to Me and Love Story. I felt like they were done a lot better, and of course 15. I didn't feel that on here at all. I think it's the weakest out of the re-recording so far. Not that it's bad. I mean, it's Taylor Swift, and early Taylor Swift is good, but I just I just can't get into the length of this album, and But tell me what you think and your overall thoughts on this as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think the the length discussion for the re-recordings is interesting because like you can compare the vaults alone to each other, and the red vault was massive,
Yeah,
and
it was the
red
best one.
it was massive, but it also had the best material.
Yeah,
So like if we're talking about bang for your buck vault, I think this added songs that I will go back to without adding too much fluff. Not that Red added like an insane amount of fluff, but like nothing new is amazing, and um, I can't even remember if their bonus tracks are from the vault. Fake Swifty over here, but like the very first night I think was the vault track that is also really good. Um, and that I mean that album is approaching 2 hours, if not over that mark. And this
something like
one,
that.
an hour 44, like that's a very long album, and I can't say that I like every single song on here. Um, I do think I have enough of an appreciation for the original track list where I can get through those 14 and still be excited to hear more.
Yeah,
Um, I have kind of a weird relationship with this album. I have kind of a weird relationship with this artist because I'm a reformed Taylor hater who's backed my way into having her as like my fifth most played artist of the year and
wow.
climbing potentially.
That's quite a
So
regression. Well, I don't know if that's a regression or a progression. I don't
progression,
know. Yeah, progression. Yeah, we'll settle it there.
a change, but
Sure.
basically like I listened to this on a drive the first time, the original.
Right.
Um, there were things about it I just it was not gripping me. I got to Dear John, and it seems sacrilegious now in retrospect, but I just thought it was it was too much. Just going in on like this. It's this isn't like a subtweet. This is a direct attack on a famous person, and I know he's an asshole. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not here to support
Great,
him.
great, great artist, but
Yeah. Um, I guess I thought like I think All Too Well is an amazing song. I
yeah,
think All
one of
Too
the
Well
best.
it does a similar role on its album as Dear John does on this album, and I think that song is just better. So I was going in with this like negative bias towards I guess albums that weren't Red or Folklore because I'm like just trying to have this negative spin on Taylor as an artist because I was being cynical at the time. And now I'm much more appreciative. I go back and I listen to all of her albums that I hadn't been listening to semi frequently, and I get to speak now, and this is it. My opinion just shifted.
Mm.
Like there were only a couple songs that I really liked, and then now there's only like one or two that I'm not crazy about. And even Innocent, like I say I'm not crazy about it because it's about Kanye, and as a result of that, has aged pretty poorly because he's anything but innocent
Right.
in
Yeah.
how he presents himself since, or at least in the very recent past. Um, and like the story of us not being one of my favorites, but pretty much the other 12 I either like or love. So I think I've gotten to a point where I'm not necessarily the most objective about the original songs on here. I can pick apart the stuff I don't like about the vault tracks. Like I think Electric Touch is boring, and I think Timeless is just it's corny. It's a corny like attempt at this sort of retro nostalgia that doesn't really work for me. And Foolish One just I don't even have anything much to say about it. I just think it's pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
And so there's other stuff that's more interesting before it. Um, so as a whole, if I'm looking at I guess the point that I'm trying to make, as a whole, if I'm looking at the Taylor's versions, I think the one that has the highest percentage of hits is Speak Now for me. And
Oh, okay.
I'm not a huge fan of Fearless overall. There aren't too many songs that I love. And then with Red, it's a lot of highs and a lot of lows, I think. There's some songs I really don't care for much at all. And some of her best songs ever, like All Too Well and State of Grace. And I'm a huge Treacherous fan. But I see this as an improvement. And I understand if you don't, because there's more bloat, and especially if you don't like the second half of the track list that much, because
Yeah.
it does come in with some hitters right away. You've got Mine, Back to December in the first three tracks, and then you've got Mean before you flip the vinyl over. So
Yeah, it's kind of hard to top like the first few tracks on this album, which are just so quintessential and huge radio hits back in the day.
yeah, but some of my absolute favorites, and like if I were to make a Mount Rushmore of the Speak Now tracks, I think three of them would be in the back half with Enchanted, Long Live, and Haunted. Haunted being like there is one actual other gripe that I have for a change. Haunted has this echo effect on the vocals that like I didn't notice the first time. It was we're listening out of like laptop speakers, but when you get it in headphones, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's like the
Sure.
triangle in Yeah by Usher. Like it just gets on your nerves every single time. So, but aside from that, I think there are things about Innocent that are even better. Like it sounds harder and the bass hits and it's just the drums are going just blasting in your ears. But regardless, um, Haunted is a song I really like, even if it has a minor problem in the re-recording.
Sure, sure.
And uh, the other one I would put up there is Mine, which just always been a song I really love. Um, and yeah, so front half punches you in the face, back half might be an acquired taste or just a specific thing that I really like, whereas it doesn't have sort of the dynamism perhaps of something like Red that has all those ups and downs.
Mm. No, that's completely fair, man. And I don't know, like I feel like with Red, I just think it's more there's more to chew on, and I think it doesn't repeat itself too much, and I think there's some really great additions. So it's just one of those things where I could just go back to the original. Not that I want to give him money, of course. But you know, if I were to take beat for beat, what is a more consistent record? I have to go with Speak Now, and I feel that about every re-recording. But hey, I'm not a huge 1989 fan, so I'd be interested once that one hits to see how much either it gets better or worse. It could go either way, but as of now, I think I'm going to give this album a score of a 7 out of 10. Like I said, I love the stuff that's already there. Mine is still my favorite, or not mine, mean, but mine is probably like close to second or third favorite
Yeah,
on here. It's still my favorite song in this album, but I just don't think that there's enough substantial changes for me to really justify me liking it more. But I respect the hell out of what Taylor's doing. Nobody's done anything like her, and you got to give her the credit she deserves in that sense.
absolutely. I if I'm giving it a score, I think I would have given the original album an 8, and I'm not moving off of that. I think there are some things I like better and some songs that I'm just taking with me and throwing on a playlist. But I think overall, as an album experience, it's pretty much just as good, uh, because you lose a little bit of that consistency and you gain some highlights along the way and some improvements, uh, in terms of vocals, mainly at least.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, I love this album,
That's
and
all.
took me a while to get there, but I loved it when I listened to it, with fresh ears and fresh mixes. So
Well, hey, now you've gotten to that point, so congratulations. You're maybe a Swiftie, I don't know. But still, I it's interesting you say that because I also I'd probably give the original Speak Now around an 8 or maybe a 7.5 if I listen to it again. So if that tells you how much I dislike this album compared to the original, there you go. There's your scale. But hey, Andy, I just want to thank you for coming on and chatting about this record. It's been such a fun time. I think we really hashed it out. It's going to be quite a lengthy review, but hey, I'm really glad to have you on. And where can the good folks find you if they want to look for you?
I'm on album of the year at Andy Type Beat. Definitely go over there if you want to see just all of my scores, and you'll find something to disagree with. Don't worry.
Yes,
Uh, I'm,
trust
I'm
me, I
on
have.
I'm on Instagram at the same handle at Andy Type Beat. Private for now, but I'll probably accept you. Don't worry.
All right, awesome.
I'm looking to go public, go
Yeah,
global, really.
well, hey, that's probably the best we could all get, right? But hey, I'll make sure to link those down in the description below. Of course, you got to check this guy out. Got a lot of great opinions on music. Very thoughtful if you haven't seen already from this video. And yeah, guys, smash the like button if you like what you're watching here, of course. And if you're new, subscribe. We appreciate more people joining this channel. And be sure to stay tuned for some very special videos I have lined up, especially that of my video for the ranking of the inaugural Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 1986. I know I said I was going to do it before, and that is coming to you very soon. Very interested to hear what you guys think about that and what you think about those legendary, well, beyond legendary artists at this point. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, joining us for a nice music discussion. I'll be sure to come back with more album reviews, hopefully this year. And yeah, guys, until then, take it easy.
Someday I'll be